What's going on, everyone? AP over here at Rumpier Sports, bringing to you the Lineup Builder Show with our partner Sabersim. We got Jordan in here like we do every week. Jordan, what is going on, my man?
Not a whole lot. We got the Super Bowl this weekend. It always goes fast. Had to do a little NFL showdown again. I know we've been doing NBA the last couple of weeks, but have to do a little NFL showdown for the big game. So crazy week down in Arizona, right? I mean, it's got to just be nuts down there. Super Bowl on Sunday, Waste Management Open going on. It would be a fun time to be down there in Phoenix.
I mean, imagine if you could like go to the Waste Management, Friday, Saturday, and then have the Super Bowl lined up on Sunday. I mean, that would be seems like the absolute nut setup. So yeah, I got the up here in the background in front of me. I got the Waste Management on, and the other thing this week has just been insane with the NBA trade deadline.
Right.
Obviously, down in Phoenix, things are crazy. We got Kevin Durant going down there. Really, really crazy stuff. We'll be back on NBA next week, but it's a Super Bowl. I think this is one of the most interesting showdown slate. I mean, every showdown slate is interesting because there's always ways to get different angles that you can play on. But we have this team, we have two teams where on the Philly side, you have these three running backs. They kind of rotate in. Gainwell had a really good postseason. You got Sanders in there, who's obviously their starter guy. And then on the Chiefs side, you have something kind of similar, but then you have a lot of unpredictableness in as far as the receivers go. We saw that 2 weeks ago in the divisional round, in the against the Bengals. With KC, all their wide receivers getting hurt and everything. So, and then you also have like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who's active on the squad. There's going to be so many ways to go on this showdown slate. I am very excited to break this down with you, Jordan. Before we do, please, everyone, I would appreciate it. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. It helps us out a lot. Also, if you don't follow Rumpier Sports on Twitter, please do so. We're going to be running a campaign, I believe. We're almost to 20K followers on Twitter, so go over there, follow us Twitter, hit the like, hit the subscribe. Jordan, let's dive in.
Yeah.
Let's do what we do each and every time, because I haven't messed around with too many builds yet. Obviously, NBA has been crazy, and today, tomorrow, Saturday, I'm going to be dialing in my NFL stuff. So this is going to be a first look for me. I don't know what the cash builds look like right now, so I'm excited to take a look.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and dive in. I think it's an interesting slate as well. Like both of these teams, pretty deep teams in that, like well down the salary list. You've got guys that we know are going to be involved in the offense. They're going to be getting snaps. The other thing that's interesting here too, the contests are enormous. I mean, there's smaller contests in the lobby that you can find, obviously, if you like the smaller fields. But for the big stuff, I mean, we're talking, I think, 470,000 lineups in the DraftKings flagship GPP there, the Millie. So, I mean, in a normal week, we talk about duplication. You might be getting duped with some of the most popular lineups a few hundred times. I mean, there are going to be lineups, very popular builds in those contests that are duped, 1,000 times plus. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see a lineup get up to like 2,000 or 3,000 or 4,000 plays in those, especially for something that the cash builds really like. So definitely a good opportunity to try to get a little bit different there. But we've got the cash build pulled up. I wanted to get this built here. So what I did, basically set the settings to cash, turns all of our sliders off. You're basically building Sabersim like it's any other optimizer, right? The reason why this is so useful for Showdown, you're basically getting a chance to see what all of your opponents in your contests, what their builds are going to look like just based on the projections, right? So gives you an idea of what the breakdown starts to look like there. I just did 100 builds just so we could get familiar here. But, I mean, Jalen Hurts, right? Most expensive captain here, but maybe a little underpriced relative to the projections, right? He's got that rushing upside here. I think like a 60% chance to score a touchdown, a rushing touchdown, according to the Sims, and really just a little bit more expensive than Mahomes. So right off the bat, something that jumps out to me here, I do think Hurts captain is going to be just a really popular direction this week.
So a couple things. This build right now that I'm looking at absolutely looks like it's going to get duped. One, for a few reasons. 50K salary, nothing left on the table. Jalen Hurts captain, Patrick Mahomes in there, and Travis Kelce in there with a punt. We all know Kansas City, they run these gimmicky plays. Like if Noah Gray lands in the end zone, you're going to love where you're sitting. And then you got Goddard, obviously. So double tight end, double quarterback, kicker, and then a punt, actually triple tight end. What's so interesting in like with this being a popular path, I do think it's going to be a popular path. The Jalen Hurts captain, double quarterback, or double quarterback in the flex, maybe a punt captain. But it goes back to what I was talking about when we started the show. The running backs, there's, in those first few builds, we didn't see any Pacheco, no McKinnon, no Sanders, no Gainwell, and then no receivers either. You got A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith.
Right.
And then obviously on the Chiefs side, it's like way, way up in the air. So this is – I think this is going to be – like if you're looking to take down that million top prize in a massive pool, you really want to stay away. You want to understand where ownership's going to go. You want to understand what is the build going to look like that everyone is on. Very much like this. It has to. It just really does. Then what you want to do is how can I get different but without sacrificing a lot of the safety and upside. We don't want to just throw bad lineups out there. And that's what using Sabersim is why it's such a great tool. It's going to help us do that. What do you see right here on the surface? Like, does anything pop out to you as far as, do you kind of agree with me? Like, this type of route has to be the popular route?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's an interesting slate. I think the tight ends here are both going to be very popular, right? Don't need to say much about Travis Kelce, obviously, especially paired with Mahomes. Probably the highest non-QB projected player in the pool this week across the board. So going to be very popular there. But Dallas Goedert is another name that's kind of interesting here, showing up in 62% of the cash builds here. We have like a fairly modest ownership projection for him at the moment, but he is basically, along with Jalen Hurts, the best value on the board with like a real salary and a clear role in the offense, right? Some of these really cheap guys show up as good values here. They'll probably be a little bit popular thrown in to fill out a lineup. But Goddard, I think, is going to be one of those guys here this week with his projection that just makes lineups work for a lot of people, especially when you're using Hurts in the captain, or maybe even when you're using Hurts in the flex. So, yeah, I think these double tight end builds could be pretty interesting. I think one way right off the bat here that jumps out to me is a way to get different, even if you're playing a more Eagles heavy or even a Hurts captain kind of build, is maybe looking at fading Dallas Goedert and hoping that A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith are just the guys that soak up all of that usage there. Because I think the average projections are just showing us here that's going to be a popular path. So, one other thing, the kickers do pop here a little bit as well, right? 4K for Butker, 4.2 for Jake Elliott. If people are going Hurts, Mahomes, Kelce, these are the guys that are going to start to fit in, right? You're going to throw one kicker in from either team, fit in one of those other cheap value guys, and you can kind of see what this popular construction is going to look like here.
Yeah, both defenses playing really well right now, obviously. So, if they stop them in the red zone, brings the kickers into play. Let's do a couple things. So let's go back. We got this base build. Let's do a few things. Let's go back to the home screen. We haven't changed any projections. Let's look at two different scripts, and then we'll go into kind of what I see happening. And then, if then we can go into your script that you see happening, because I think it'll make it a lot of fun. So let's look at what does like a KC 33, Philly 31. You could do it either way. You can do Philly 33. Let's go KC since I'm a KC homer. So this is kind of a shootout script. Let's just see how the projections change, and let's run a base build again. I guess, do you want to do a cash build setting?
No, I think let's do a GPP.
Right,
yeah, and so, a couple things going on here. So we changed the team totals up here. This is a really cool feature, especially for Showdown, especially if you want to target a particular game script. So what you do, you put the team totals you want in there, you apply the changes. We're actually going into our database of sims for this game and looking at, a subset where this is the final score, or this is the average score for that subset, and adjusting all the players accordingly. So what's really nice about this is you do kind of get this nice correlated change here. You don't have to worry about, how does this affect every player in the game when we get the shootout game script? You just say, this is the script I want to play, and we'll adjust those projections for you. So, yeah, I think at this point, go ahead.
Yeah, all right, so go back there. One thing that I think is so sharp, and a lot of people, may not get this, but like, why would a defense's projection go up during a shootout? It's because there's many different ways to score. One of those is a defensive touchdown. So it makes a lot of sense. And the other thing is, if you have a pick six, the ball is immediately in the other quarterback's hands again. And so obviously that type of, like if you're an over better and like a pick six is like you're fist pumping because that's only helping the over there. So I love seeing that in there as well, you know, on the Chiefs side, obviously with the Chiefs being favored. So
exactly.
Or I mean, in this script.
That's the other thing I think that in particular jumps. We basically flipped the spread as well. So we're playing the over script, but also Chiefs winning the game by 2 here. So it does make sense that their projection has gone up a little bit as well. You see the Eagles has gone down by almost 2 points. So I think that's part of it as well. But yeah, I mean, sometimes the effect of this stuff is not entirely what you might expect, right? And this is a big jump, so everybody's in the green here. But, you know, we could play an over script where maybe it just goes 7 points over the over, and we would probably see a little bit of a different result here. But
yeah, let's run this and see what it looks like. I'm very curious.
Yeah, and in this case, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go back. Let's pick the large field contest here. We'll look at the top 150, and now we're looking at the sims, right? Sim diversity very high at 10. I'm going to actually bump this max salary back up. We can come back to salary stuff if we want to, but we'll build the full salary builds here for now. And now what we're doing, we're going in and we're taking single game simulations with our new game script here and building 1,500 optimal lineups for the way that this game could play out, where not necessarily every sim is going to have final score, Chiefs 33, Eagles 31, but we're pulling from a subset of sims where that's the average here. So should see a lot more offense here. I'm interested to see what impact that has too on some of the skill position players here. See if we get a little more AJ Brown, Devonta Smith, Juju, those kinds of guys.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for too. I want to see if we go the shootout route, how does the roster construction overall change? You know, running it this way, like, are we still getting a lot of double quarterback builds? Are we getting more wide receivers in the captain? I also know when we turn the slider up to 10, we typically get a wider pool in the captain, or in the captain pool, right? A wider range of players.
Yeah, and that's correct, right? And that makes sense. As we get those higher variance outcomes in there, it's just going to lead. You'll probably have more players in your pool, period, but definitely be a little bit more spread out. You know, I know a common question is from folks that, you know, maybe want to play a more concentrated pool. You start asking, well, should I turn sim diversity down? For NFL Showdown, I absolutely would not, right? It's so valuable to have lineups that are built from single game sims that it's always worth building on 10. If you do want to get a little more concentrated, best way to do that is to just curate the player pool in the home screen. So, you know, select the captains you actually want to use and then build. But yeah, we've got the build here pulled up. You can see, yeah, definitely getting us a little more spread out here. It does jump out, you know, quarterback still really showing up here. And I know we're playing a pretty aggressive over script here, but we're getting almost half of our lineups with Mahomes and Hurts as those two captains here. But a little bit more spread out. We're starting to see some other names jumping out here in the captain pool here.
I'm only looking at the top two builds, but I still don't see a lot of the running backs, which is really interesting because both teams, I mean, when we get to my script that I think, like how I see the game playing out, obviously we're going to get that adjusted. But as far as in the flex, like look at that, 8% Pacheco, McKinnon, 7%, Gainwell, Sanders. The running backs just, in my opinion, have to be interesting plays here. Both teams are aggressive. I think we're going to see a lot of screens, especially on the Kansas City side. And it's just these guys are going to come into play. So it's definitely very interesting. Do you think it's a price thing? Because like when you look at their price tags, you know, 7.2 for Pacheco, 6.8 for McKinnon, 7.8 for Miles Sanders. I mean, yeah, that has to be what's keeping ownership down here.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. And I think it's an uncertainty thing as well, right? I mean, both of these teams at least appear to have three-headed backfields now, but a little uncertainty on how that usage is going to be applied. I mean, I know throughout most of the playoffs, the end of the regular season, it seemed like McKinnon has kind of become the pass-catching back, but then last week, Pacheco goes out and catches 6 balls, and I know McKinnon had a little bit of an injury he was dealing with throughout that game. We don't know what CEH's role is exactly going to be in this game here. And the Eagles as well, right? I mean, it was kind of the Miles Sanders show for a lot of the season. He was like a league winner in a lot of best ball and season-long stuff. And then you get Gainwell becoming more involved, and Boston Scott even becoming a little bit involved here at the end of the season. So I think part of that, I think it's a pricing thing. Yeah, I think you're some of these guys are priced up to their peak usage here. And now we've got other guys on the scene taking up some of that usage. But it does make for a situation where this is a route to get a little bit different. I mean, even Pacheco, McKinnon, Gainwell, guys that have, some ownership going to them, it's going to be less than the pass catchers, right? I mean, they're not going to be as owned as A.J. Brown, Goddard, Devonta Smith, Juju, Kelsey on the other side. So definitely, I think the running backs is an interesting path here to get a little different.
One thing to keep an eye on, too, just talking about, at least on the Kansas City side, running backs, they typically take 3 running backs into a game. So keep an eye on what they do with CEH. If they activate him and, Ronald Jones is the man out, keep an eye on that. Like everyone always says, like Kansas City, they don't like CEH and stuff. I feel the opposite. I think Andy Reid likes him for whatever reason. So just something to keep an eye on as we approach this game is what the running back situation is going to be like in Kansas City. I mean, CEH was a first-round pick for them. It's hard to say, like, is he going to – where would he fall in line? It would be behind Pacheco and McKinnon, obviously. But they do like – he knows their pass coverage. Like, he knows how to, pass block and all that different stuff. So – something to keep an eye on, but I think it's just going to make things very interesting for Showdown purposes. Let's go run the opposite script now. Let's do a low scoring game. I just want to see how that looks. I'll let you pick the scores here, but let's go way under the total here.
Okay. Yeah.
Like 17 to like 23 or something.
I was going to say 17-14 and assume that we get kind of a defensive game. I mean, we played the Chiefs winning the game with the overscript. I like if the under hits, I kind of like the Eagles side of it. They got a good defense. I mean, what do you think about that total here to build this one?
I mean, I don't see that total panning out with these two teams, but I want to see what it looks like for Showdown purposes for sure.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so we'll take a look here, and I think this can just be useful here. Even even if we're not bought into that being the final score of the game here, just to experiment how the builds are changing as we're looking at different things here. So.
I'm just curious to see now if if we get more running backs in these builds. If not, then it has to mean that just the running back situation is going to be very low owned, or the spot that everyone is uncertain about, which just means they're going to be lower owned. So that's where if you have a big stand on any side, maybe it's Gainwell, maybe it's Miles Sanders. I mean, Miles Sanders, I think, is a guy that you should always have. If you're multi-entering, you should always have some interest in, because we've seen him have these like 2-3 touchdown games. So and you can run screen like Kansas. That's the one thing, and why I feel so good about the running backs. I don't feel good about which one. It's just Kansas City. They like to bring pressure. The Eagles, they're going to bring pressure big. They want to make Patrick Mahomes uncomfortable. We did not see that from the Bengals. I was very surprised. We saw it late, but Kansas City did a really good job against them, keeping Mahomes fresh. But, I mean, if you just think about Joe Burrow in that game, he was sacked, 5 or 6 times? I don't think the game plan is going to change that much. I think they're going to bring pressure and make Jalen Hurts uncomfortable. So that, in my opinion, opens up the screen game. We're going to get passes out of the backfield, especially on the Kansas City side, which brings Jerick McKinnon. Pacheco, he caught some balls out of the backfield last game. And then it's who's the third man going to be? And that's the big question mark for me. So, all right, we got this up.
Yeah. So I was looking at the captains here. I mean, we can start there. Eagles defense all of a sudden really jumps out, makes some sense. I mean, the one thing that has completely fallen off, right, is the quarterbacks. They're non-existent here pretty much at the captain spot. And it's interesting. This definitely looks like this is the contrarian script, right? I mean, the guys you get here in your captain pool start becoming very low owned. Even in the over script we were playing, you're almost not getting a ton of leverage by playing that particular direction, just because it's going to put you down a similar build path as to what a lot of the cash lineups look like here. I think this is a little bit of an aggressive under situation, but I think this is an interesting idea here where you start to have some very low owned captains, and you can go in and clean up, and maybe you don't want to play Noah Gray and Justin Watson and captain and things like that. But you really start to see some lower owned names showing up here in the captain pool with this script.
Yeah. And I don't mind these like onslaught type builds, taking my bias out of it. Just think back to when Mahomes played Brady, Tampa Bay and Brady, in the Super Bowl. That was an absolute, they destroyed them, absolutely destroyed them. And your onslaught builds, your 5-1s, 4-2s were what shipped that year. So I don't mind that. Even though the spread is close, I think both teams have the ability here to I think the game's going to be close. I think it's going to be really fun, entertaining. But if one team blows out the other, I wouldn't be surprised. Like if the Eagles have looked incredible. And, obviously they didn't have the toughest tests through the playoffs. So this is going to be their first real tough test against Kansas City. But they have all the pieces there, and they're a very sound, very fundamentally sound football team. So I don't think anything is out of the question in these onslaught builds. So I'm not going to play like the Eagles defense and captain. That's just not something I'm going to do. I get it and why you might do that, but that's not how I like to play. But a 5-1 build, a 4-2 Eagles build, I think is a fine way to go if that's the way you see the game playing out.
Yeah.
Anything else with these low scoring, under scripts, is anything else catching your eye? Because the one thing that continues to catch my eye is no running backs.
Yeah, no, I mean, it does jump out here. And I think that'd probably be an opportunity. I like that angle quite a bit, right? I mean, if it's so important to have a different script here or a different construction in this kind of contest and this kind of slate here. So I think it's a spot maybe where I'd want to make an adjustment to some of those projections for those guys. And one other thing that does jump out to me here, and it's not all of them, but we are getting some lower salary builds here too. And I don't necessarily always like the idea of sacrificing salary just for the sake of sacrificing salary and trying to avoid dupes. But when you're playing a script where the game goes under here, and there's less points getting scored, period, it's going to increase the value of some of those lower salary guys, right? I mean, we've got 14 points for the Chiefs here, really just 2 touchdowns. If Noah Gray happens to walk into one of those or something like that, I mean, he's going to be a must-have in the build, and it opens up those lower salary options here a little bit for you, which people just don't like to build. So I kind of like that too. I think I'm leaning towards, just from the sake of differentiation a little bit, playing a game where this does go a little bit under here.
Yeah, I like that. Let's go back and let's I can kind of talk through how, if we want to reset everything, I can kind of talk through like what I see happening on
let's do it.
A macro basis, just big picture. So obviously I have the Chiefs winning. But I think the running back, so pull up just the Kansas City side. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go back to McKinnon this week. I think you're going to see a lot more screen passes. McKinnon over the past 2 weeks has been primarily used as, a passing running back, because out of the 3 that they have, he's the best at that. And even last game against the Bengals, you saw a lot of Pacheco and McKinnon on the field at the same time, where Pacheco was the guy, running routes and McKinnon was blocking. But Mahomes looks to be getting healthier. I don't think full protection. It's going to be very important, obviously, but they have to get McKinnon. He was too good this season not to get him involved here. Mm-hmm. And he's going to be low owned, flying under the radar. He was a touchdown machine during the season. So I want to bump him up. I'm playing on a script where I think he catches like 4 or 5 catches, 55 yards and a touchdown type of outcome. So I want to give him a nice bump, like 14.5. I know it's getting aggressive, but I'm accounting for a touchdown in there. Pacheco, I think, is fine. NVS, I was very impressed with. Maybe give him a bump too. He's the one guy who we know is healthy. Mm-hmm. Juju, a little banged. Obviously, Juju is a go. Tony is a go. These guys, but they do have concerns there. Justin Watson is back too. I think he's another interesting guy. I mean, the other problem with Kansas City is there are so many touchdown options. I mean, it could be Justin Watson. It could be Sky Moore, Noah Gray. And I don't want multiple pieces, these punt type pieces, into my lineups. So I don't know if there's an easy way to make a rule around that. Like anyone, I guess, how would you make an easy rule out of that? Would you do it based off projection?
Yeah,
or would you do it group, basically?
Yes. Okay. So I would probably make a group here, right, and just kind of grab these salary filler types here and say something.
So Watson, Noah Gray, Sky Moore, CEH, all of those guys. No projection on Marcus Kemp, but
yeah. So we'll just basically create a quick rule here, group rule manual. We're going to say use no more than one of these guys, right? Which should help with that a little bit there. So.
And then let's go back up to the top real quick.
Yeah.
So Kelsey, I think it's fine, and then Mahomes. Yeah, basically, I want to see what it looks like with the running backs bumped up, and we got McKinnon bumped up pretty good, and maybe let's just say CEH is give him like a 3.5, just to see what it looks like.
So do you want to do anything here with grouping out the running backs at all? I know you mentioned McKinnon and Pacheco on the field at the same time a lot last week. Do you want to do like a max 1 for the running backs or even a max 2 or anything like that?
I want to leave that alone for right now. Cool. I think go to the Eagles side, and then what we'll do is maybe we can make some kind of big picture rules there, like one kicker, no double kickers or something like that. Let's bring Hurts down just a little bit. I get the rushing upside and everything, but I really like how Kansas City's defense is playing. They're going to get some sacks. I know he's going to get some yards on the ground, but I think it's a little high there. And then I think, the passing attack is somewhat interesting. So Goddard's going to be the popular guy. Devonta Smith's been incredible. I want to give him a bump up. I like his style of play. I think he gets in the box. They can use him so many different ways. So I definitely want to give him a little bit of a bump. And then Gainwell, he's just been incredible. We can give him a little bit of a bump. And then what's your thoughts on kickers? I think, it's a Super Bowl. Teams are going to want to get points early, while each team's feeling each other out. If the opportunity for points, the ability to get on the board, you're going to take it, I think, at least, you would think with these two teams. But I do only want one kicker I'm not going to have any double kicker lineups. So I think max of one kicker. And I don't want to force in a kicker, but I just want to have that rule in there that's, a one max.
Agreed. Yeah, I think that makes some sense there. I'm curious. I'll get both of these guys added. I'm curious how they're correlated to one another as well. Let's take a look here, or maybe they're not, but I am curious if one kicker is a little bit negatively correlated to the other, which would make some sense here. Yeah, they are. So pretty strong negative correlation between these two, which means basically it's not happening very often in the Sims where they're both hitting their upside. So you might get some lineups, right? There's going to be outcomes where these guys can be in the optimal together, but it's not going to happen very often here. So definitely checks out there. So
can you pull up Jalen Hurts' range of outcomes graph? I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah.
I mean, it has to look the best out of all the players, just because with this rushing upside. So there you go. Yeah, that's a really just cool feature. Can you just we're going to get new watchers each and every week.
Yeah.
What are we looking at right here for anyone that hasn't seen this before?
Yeah. So this is Jalen Hurts' range of outcomes, his distribution across our entire set of Sims for this game. So we'll have thousands of Sims for the game. We're projecting him at 26.46. We've dropped that down to 24. But obviously, there's a wide range of what's actually possible there. So you can see, his most common outcome is right there around what that average is. But he's got this big tail here of ceiling outcomes where, he's scoring 40 fantasy points 5% of the time here. Also has some downside in there, right? At 10 or 12 point outcomes 7% or so of the time. These distributions, I think, are pretty interesting. In particular, it can be interesting to see how different positions have different looking distributions, and also across different sports, how does a baseball hitter compare to an NFL quarterback and things like that. It can be useful to dive into. Our correlations down here below is basically how well does this given player correlate to the other players in the game. Positive correlation means that their outcomes are likely to happen somewhat similarly, right? When Jalen Hurts is having an upside game, A.J. Brown is more likely to as well. The opposite is true as well. Negative correlations, right? When Jalen Hurts is having a great game, not looking great for the Chiefs defense necessarily, right? So this can be very useful. You just see this by just clicking the player name. It pairs nicely as well with the player percentiles, right? So these are basically break points in the distribution for different probabilities. So Jalen Hurts' 25th percentile outcome means he's scoring 19.3 points in the Sims 75% of the time, right? His 95th percentile outcome, there's only 5% of outcomes where he scores more than 43.8. So it can be really useful just to get an idea of these different distributions, these different outcomes, especially if you're not sure whether or not you want to adjust a player, right? Looking at the high-end upside, I think could be interesting. Like a guy like Miles Sanders, to me, does actually look like he's maybe a little bit underprojected because 21.3 to me, just intuitively feels a little low for his 95th percentile outcome.
Well,
right?
let's do this. All right, let's bump him up to the 85th. Let's bump both Sanders and I'm just kind of curious. Bump him up to the 85th percentile. So it'd be 50. I know we're a little aggressive, but hold on, I got an idea here. And then Gainwell also, but then set a rule, one max between the two, and then let's do the same for Pacheco and McKinnon. So we're getting the run. So the thing is, it's so tough to run on this Eagles team. I mean, the one thing I will give them credit for, they got my boy Ndamukong Suh. Obviously, I'm a Husker fan, so I always root for Suh. I'm nervous about that too. Suh is going to be coming for Mahomes' ankle. That's a huge, huge concern for Chiefs backers. But Suh is a beast, and I think it was Mark in chat that was right here was talking about it. I mean, this Eagles pass rush 6 men deep. They definitely are deep in that area. So, but that's why I like the running backs. I mean, these offensive coordinators are sharp. You're going to see these running backs, little dump offs to the running backs. But let's set it. Yeah, one of McKinnon or Pacheco, and then one of Gainwell and Sanders. I just think it's interesting. So I don't know if there's outcomes where you could have a McKinnon Pacheco build, make sense. So I don't know if I'd actually run a rule like this for like all 150. But if you wanted to, if you're breaking things up a little bit and you wanted, maybe you're in a 20 max or something like that, I wouldn't mind a rule like that where you're trying to capture the upside from one running back out of the backfield. So
for sure, yeah. Especially when if you're making an aggressive adjustment like this, right? And we're really playing that angle where it's one of these guys. I like that approach quite a bit here.
My last thing is all I want is Mahomes' projection higher than Hurts's. It can be 0.1 higher, it can be whatever, but that's the final thing. Then let's run.
Let's do 23.5.
Perfect.
Cool.
All right, let's run this thing. Let's see what it looks like.
Yeah, let's take a look here. I'm going to increase that back up. We'll get 1,500 builds. Start taking a look.
But how do you see the game playing out, Jordan?
I like the Chiefs in this game. I think I like them outright. I think there's a little bit of. I don't want to necessarily say that the Eagles are a pretend team here, but I think they did have an easy path. And sometimes I think when you get to the big game, there's just a lot of value of having been there before. And I think the Chiefs obviously have a ton of that. This Eagles team in particular doesn't as much. I wouldn't be surprised. I think we'll get a close game here, but I wouldn't be surprised to see the Chiefs jump out to an early lead here, even if the Eagles do end up coming back. Yeah.
You make a good point. That's why I'm fine with these onslaught builds. I'm just saying, like, fundamentally on paper, the Eagles take away the quarterbacks. The Eagles have a more complete team. However, we got Mahomes on the other side. The defense is playing out of their mind. I've been talking about it all through the playoffs. And if you're doubting this Kansas City defense, I mean, you haven't been watching. Like, you just haven't. And people were making fun of me against the Bengals. I said Kansas City is going to make Joe Burrow work. They're going to be all over him, and they were. If Kansas City gets up and now you got Hurts, who has been dealing with a shoulder issue, maybe a couple bad throws, man, it could get bad in a hurry in that script. That's why in Showdown, you got to go with your gut. You got to go and you got to run the scripts that you see playing out. And if you do that, you're typically going to be different than the field. But that's why I'm going to be looking at those onslaught builds, the 5-1s, 4-2s, especially for the Super Bowl, and both sides also, like both sides. So that way too, like, I got to have a couple Philly onslaught builds just in case they absolutely own my Chiefs, and maybe I hit the nuts or something. to salvage the night. But all right, what are we looking at here?
Yeah, so I mean the running backs jumping out, right? Pacheco, we're getting into a little over 35%. McKinnon up there, Gainwell's popping here. Kind of a spread of different guys showing up in that captain spot. But it does look like we got quite a bit of that running back usage here in the captain spot. I think it's interesting, right? Especially we're already talking about maybe a position that's just underrepresented in a lot of the builds and a lot of the lineups we're going to see in the contest here. Playing these guys in the captain spot is probably the best way to maximize that leverage, right? As unpopular as these guys might end up being in the flex spot, it's very easy to imagine a game script where Pacheco, McKinnon, even a guy like Gainwell is the optimal captain for me here. And it just looks like it's going to be a very unpopular route. So that's one thing that's jumping out. I will say, might be a situation where we do revisit the projection just because of the rule we set here. If we've got 75% of our lineups have one of these guys in the captain, we know that there's going to be very few lineups in our pool where they're showing up in the flex just because we grouped that out. So we could go back to that here, but definitely got the impact we were looking for with those running back captains.
Yeah, and good point there, because we didn't, while we were very aggressive on the running backs there, we didn't appropriately probably adjust the other skill positions as well. So I agree with you there. And I probably if I'm playing a running back, the interesting thing is I like them more in the flex, like your McKinnons, your Pachecos, and one or the other. And when I think of captain, I do think of like a Devontae Smith or MVS or even Mahomes or Jalen Hurts, just because I see one of those guys, they've just had the best floor ceiling combination. But we saw 2 weeks ago, MVS had a monster game, obviously. I think which side or who is the most likely to have that big game to be optimal in the captain, I think on the Kansas City side, obviously Travis Kelce. And then, if MVS showed up like he did, and obviously things went his way. Everyone got hurt. If everyone doesn't get hurt again, it's hard to say that MVS is going to have that type of production. So who is most likely to be optimal in the captain spot in the Kansas City side? I think it really comes down to Travis Kelce or Patrick Mahomes. Or if it's a shootout and you get one of these punt cheap guys who lands in the end zone, maybe off a bomb or something like that, maybe a Tony or whoever, that could be what lands in the optimal, and then you have all these other skill players. On the Philly side, I see more. You could have A.J. Brown. You could have Devontae Smith, obviously. I even think Goddard, has the ability to have a pretty big game. I think the upside, though, for Smith and Brown is higher than Dallas Goddard. And then Jalen Hurts. So, I find myself focusing kind of on these receivers and quarterbacks at the captain spot. And then I'm going to take a look at some of these punt guys too, like your 1K players, because sometimes there's builds out there where if you get a script where Hurts goes off, Mahomes goes off, maybe Kelce goes off, maybe one of the receivers, Devonta Smith or A.J. Brown, go off, to fit all of them into your lineup, you're going to need a punt value at your captain spot. So I don't want to fully X out those guys, or it could even be a kicker. We've seen that as well. I think actually kicker captain could be somewhat interesting. So I don't know. What do you think about all of that? I know we're adding a lot of captains back in here, but there's just so many different outcomes that could play out in this game.
Yeah, no, there is. I think that's part of what makes this such a fun slate to build for. I think a couple thoughts I have. So a lot of times I do end up liking to fade some of these lower salary guys here. I think one of the things that
Jay Stamps knows what's up. It's going to come back down to the running backs. And then it's which running back? That's going to be the biggest question that all of us have all week, because I don't think anyone knows.
Yeah, and I do like the idea of giving them a little bit of a boost and then setting some kind of rule to control against getting too many of them in your lineups. I think that's a really good approach here. I like the captain pool we've curated here. I do tend to X out a lot of the lower salary guys here. I just think, when you are playing an 1,800 Noah Gray at captain here, even though there's a game script going to be associated with him being the optimal captain, the remaining salary you have left for those flex spots is going to concentrate you on a very small set of players. I think people often think, wow, Noah Gray, 0.5% owned in the captain. He's going to be so unpopular. That's going to be an unpopular build. The rest of the players in the lineup, everybody's going to have the same 5 because it's always going to be Hurts, Mahomes, Kelsey, AJ Brown or Devonta Smith with Noah Gray thrown in there. So I'm open to leaving some of these guys in here, especially if there's really, legitimate high scoring upside for one of these guys where you really think you've got to have them. But I think that's something I do tend to X out quite a bit. But otherwise, looks good. I mean, I would consider Xing out Dallas Goedert here. I like on the Eagles side. I think my favorite way to play this Eagles side of the ball is really assume that it is the AJ Brown and Devonta Smith show, and that Goddard, comes in under his projection, takes down 60% of the lineups with him between the captain and the flex, and it just funnels to those two guys.
Let's look at one last thing, and I should actually go to the first cash build we ran.
Yeah.
What is the breakdown between and we ran 1,500, right? Or did we just
I just ran 100. Yeah, I mean, the cash build can take a little longer to build.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Optimal, so
I was going to say, let's rerun it, and we don't have to do the cash. Let's just do like a GPP setting. And I want to see the breakdown between 4-2s, 5-1s, and which side it favors, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So the one thing, and process-wise here, we've already made all these adjustments here, so it does it makes it a little bit tricky for me to go back and run a total base build here because I'm going to lose some of this work we put in if I reset it. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, yeah, we can finish out this build also because that's something that if you're a Sabersim subscriber or if you subscribe through us, you can go in there and run that too. So that's something that's always really interesting to look at.
We can, and we can look at the cash build here, which I think is still interesting. 100 top optimals, right? I was looking at this here before we got going. I do think the balanced build is going to be really popular here. We're seeing half of the optimals, almost all of the top 100 optimals are 3-3s or 4-2s. And among those 4 stacks, pretty even split between Eagles and Chiefs. So I do think that 5-1 is going to be a pretty unpopular lineup construction here for this particular game.
I like it. Can we, I guess we plugged in a bunch of different stuff. I was going to say, can we also, the last thing, can we go to the stack types and just get rid of the 3-3?
Yeah.
So it's just going to force in 4-2s and 5-1s.
Let's do it.
All right, perfect. Let's run this and see. I can't even remember what all changes we made, but
yeah, we did quite a bit here. We curated our captain pool a little bit, so we've got a tighter rotation of captains here. I think we'll probably get quite a few running backs in the flex here showing up. Uncheck that 3-3 type. I think that's about it from what we did on the last build. So I'm excited to see how this goes. And I think, one thing I love about this show that we do every week here, this is really representative of, I think, the right way to use Sabersim. You can see we've been sitting here talking about this, thinking about the game for 45 minutes or so. We've got a cash build. This is our 4th GPP build, right? We've added a little bit to the mix every single time, running builds in between. I just think it's a really good approach to get those lineups that you actually want to play in your contests. Add a little bit, run a build, see the impact, make a little more changes until you finally get that dialed in set of lineups that you like.
All right, so think about it was a 2-game slate, but Mahomes was, I believe, one of the lower-owned quarterbacks. It was Jalen Hurts, then it was Joe Burrow, then Patrick Mahomes, then Brock Purdy. From an ownership standpoint, Mahomes ended up being by far the optimal guy, just, crushed every other quarterback. You had to have Mahomes in there to get that cash. So, and everyone was higher. So you just gotta understand, no one knows exactly how the game is going to play out. We all have ideas and we all have, our thoughts on it. Understand where is ownership at, what is going to be the most popular build, and then just think about how can I get different without sacrificing, that upside, because we don't want to build the bad builds. And then it's that's why I did let's project Mahomes higher than Hurts, because I think everyone will have Hurts over Mahomes and different things like that. And then the other thing too that you can do, like we just did, which I think I'm definitely, I'm not set on what rules I want yet. One rule though, I think I am going to eliminate 3-3s and focus on 4-2s, both sides. I think you do 4-2 Philly. I think you do 4-2 Kansas City. And then I'm definitely going to have a certain percentage of 5-1s, both sides. Philly 5-1 and a KC 5-1, because that just looks like on the surface it's going to be the most contrarian route that you can go. And so I don't mind eating some chalk, but then it's more of I'm getting different because of my overall roster construction standpoint.
Yeah, I like it. I think we're getting to a point here where we've got a pretty dialed in build here where I like the way that our captain exposure
Devonta
is working
Smith
out here.
Captain, I like that.
Yep, a little bit of Mahomes in there. Go ahead.
Yeah, this makes a lot of sense too. I mean, you have we got CH in there, but we bumped him up. So I mean, CH, all right. So one, we're just messing around with different things. Who knows if he's even going to play yet? Mm-hmm. Keep an eye on the news. Kansas City always likes to bring in 3 running backs. They have 4 active right now. So you got to see what they're going to do between Ronald Jones and CEH. So I do think Ronald Jones will be the odd man out, but we will see. It comes down to how did he look in practice. So keep an eye on those reports. They're going to be coming out probably tomorrow, and then Saturday. So these builds look really interesting. Can you pull up the 5-1s and how many we're getting?
Yeah, so 22 out of 150, 15% or so of our set. They're showing up in 18% of the pool, so the full pool of 1,500 here. So, I wouldn't be opposed to the idea of trying to get overweight on this number here and saying, maybe 35% of our builds are those 5-1 stacks.
Can you highlight them to bring them up? I just want to see what they look like.
Yeah, so, and we can look here as well and see. So actually a pretty even spread of the Kansas City and Philly stacks here as well. It looks like a lot of Philly at the top, but I get into some of those builds here.
The one, so that MVS one. So this is where you got to go through and you got to just this is where you can help, to make you make some rules. I could never see MVS being optimal in the captain without Mahomes also being in the flex, but I could see Travis Kelce. And the reason is because Kelce gets a ton of volume. So Kelce could have an 11-catch game for 102 yards and 2 touchdowns. What if Mahomes threw for 225, 2 touchdowns, and got sacked a bunch of times and lost yards rushing, maybe threw a pick and fumbled the ball? I'm just making stuff up. Kelce would be optimal in that outcome. Mahomes most likely would not. So MVS though, it's big chunks of yards, and Kelce's going to get his volume. So that's where I might develop some sort of rule where it's if MVS is in the captain, Mahomes has to be in the flex. And we don't need to plug that in. We got to get out of here shortly. But that's just another way where I use Saber as part of my research process. I do it for NBA. I do it for golf. I do it for all the different sports. And I use it to help dial in everything. Yeah. And so I don't adjust my stuff and just run things once. I'm running things 10 to 15 different times. So it's fully part of my process right now. And I would honestly struggle without it. So absolutely love Sabersim. Jordan, any final thoughts on the Super Bowl, what you see strategy wise, and is there anything up and coming at Sabersim that everyone should know about?
Yeah, so a couple things. One, this kind of construction, I know it sometimes makes people a little surprised. This is such an uncommon construction, and I actually like playing these kinds of builds here, where you've got the 5-1, but the captain is coming from the one side here. I don't think it takes too much of a leap to imagine a situation where the Chiefs come out to a lead and all of the passing attack for the Eagles funnels through A.J. Brown, and you end up with this kind of optimal. They're also really uncommon in the contest. So I actually don't hate these kinds of constructions where that 5-1 gets flipped on its head. So on the game itself, I think as we've been talking through this, I do like the idea of getting to these rushing attacks here, picking one of those guys and hoping that a lot of the rushing offense goes through them. I think they're going to be unpopular. I think Dallas Goedert is starting to emerge as maybe one of my more favorite fades here. I just think he's a little too cheap. And, that's great when you want to just score average points, you're playing cash or something like that. I just think his ownership is likely to get a little inflated here. So that's kind of where I'm leaning in terms of the actual roster construction stuff.
You could make the case too, like a Travis Kelce. I know he's going to be very popular, but if I'm the Eagles have been actually pretty good against tight ends, and you have to think they're going to double him, make it really tough on Kelce. And you got to think about, okay, if they do that, what is it going to do? Who is it going to free up? And that's why I go back to the running backs. I think more, when you think about Mahomes' progressions, Kelce, where he's looking, that safety outlet is going to be Pacheco. It's going to be McKinnon. So that's why I love the running backs. It's just, it's a function of the game script that I see panning out. Anything new at Sabersim that everyone should be aware of?
Yeah. So I mean,
and you know, it's okay to say no because you guys are doing incredible stuff. You have updates all the time, and I love it. So you can. I always ask you this every week, but you can always fire back and say, "No, AP, we've had enough updates already. Leave me alone."
Yeah, no. I mean, there's always stuff we're working on, right? So, I mean, a couple things I've talked about recently. That the golf model that is now up is, I would say, basically kind of our final model here for this season. The guys worked so hard on that. It is now basically a hole by hole model. So we're picking up the differences between different holes, different skill sets of what's required to be successful on individual holes on the course. We're doing a lot of work to make sure that the ownership and the projections are dialed in before the slate locks every week. So golf really in a good spot. We're looking ahead now. NASCAR, baseball coming up here as well. So the models guys are just making sure that those are ready for the starts of those seasons. On the actual app side, features and things like that, I don't want to say too much here. I will say we're working on some changes. A common thing we hear from people, you know, they first get started with Sabersim is that it's confusing, that they're not sure where to do things or what order to do things. Part of the reason we do this show every week is to help you guys out with that, answer your questions, give you an idea of how to use the app. But we are starting to work on some bigger changes here that I think should just make everything much easier to use. So I'm going to leave it there. I don't want to tease too much right now, but that's definitely on our radar for really as we get into the 2023 year here of something we want to improve. So.
As the kids say, you absolutely love to see it. As always, Jordan, pleasure doing the show with you. We have more Super Bowl content coming up. We got the Print Factory with Big T, JSU, ODB, Dunkel. I believe they're recording tomorrow. We got to check the calendar on that. We will have a show Sunday. I will be on that. I believe Draft Cheat and our boy Crane will be on that also. So a lot of Super Bowl content coming to you through the weekend. It's going to be a ton of fun. With that, though, I am AP. That's Jordan. Let's run, Pier.